proven that he's alive, but now we don't really know what's going on with this Las Vegas medical story. Did he step down on his own will, or was he forced out? Lots more details coming out with the Trump assassination. To help me go through all of that, I have Alex Newman with me. Alex, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me, Stephen.
So just some background on Alex. You're a journalist, an author. You take great joy in exposing evil for what it is, and you are over at Liberty Sentinel. You talk about how about a year ago, Roger Stone opened up about the fact that things were trending towards that the politics was boiling too hot, and that he believed that there was going to be an attempt on Donald Trump's life. We've all now lived through that. The question is this coordination? Is this incompetence? As I watch the political theater on Capitol Hill, it sure looks a lot like incompetence, but I do have to wonder, could this be just standing out of the way and allowing corruption to come in and do its thing? What are your thoughts on the whole Donald Trump assassination situation?
Well, thank you, Stephen. Yeah, and it's a really interesting story. Back in 2017, Roger Stone got in touch with me and said, hey, we should talk. So I went to his house. I went to his studio. We spent a few hours together, and almost the whole conversation was on the record. We filmed it. It wasn't, secret communications or anything. He said a few things, that he wanted me to keep silent, but most of it was on the record. And he said the deep state absolutely despises Donald Trump. He is genuinely pro-America. He is genuinely opposed to globalism. He's genuinely opposed to the destruction of the United States of America, which so many of our elites or elitists seem to be pursuing. And so he said they're going to do anything and everything necessary to take him out. And that was during the Russia collusion hoax early on. Of course, that whole thing has fallen apart. But at the time, it wasn't clear to everybody that that was going to end in, the persecutors looking ridiculous. But he said that would fall apart. He said they would move then to what he called Plan B, which was the 25th Amendment. And of course, just like clockwork, just as Roger Stone said it would, they started promoting this idea that Donald Trump was crazy. They started putting these fringe psychiatrists on all the networks and saying, oh, look, Donald Trump is clearly crazy. He's putting us at risk and he got to be removed. I actually spoke to some of his cabinet members later, and they did say, yeah, there were efforts to recruit us to do a 25th Amendment coup against Donald Trump. Wow. to oust him from power. And then Roger Stone said that would fail too. And he said Plan C would be actually to assassinate him. And, a normal person saying that wouldn't be that big of a deal. But when somebody like Roger Stone, who's been right at the heart of American politics since the Nixon administration, says something like that, somebody who wrote a book on the assassination of John F. Kennedy, said, this is probably serious. I actually used that as one of the headlines I wrote from our conversations. And sure enough, 7 years later, it appears that that is exactly what has happened. You're right. Incompetence, idiocy is one hypothesis, at least, about what happened that needs to be considered. And I think if you look at this objectively, government is not famous for doing things well or efficiently or anything like that. But the Secret Service is by far the world's most sophisticated protection agency. I mean, there's not even a close second in the world. And so to believe that a 20-something-year-old doofus with an AR-15 got up on a roof and took a shot at the former and likely future president of the United States with nobody doing anything just strikes me as a bridge too far. I believe, based on what we've seen, that this was an attempted deep state assassination of Donald Trump. This 20-year-old doofus, Crooks, was probably a patsy. He may have actually believed he was going to assassinate Donald Trump. He may have believed he was going to be a hero and save the world from literally Hitler, as the media likes to call him. But I suspect this was a much bigger operation. And I talked to a senior guy at the DOJ just the other day. He used to work at DOJ. He's not there anymore. But he said this would be a real easy investigation. He said you just need to find out who gave the order not to have that roof covered. And that's where you start. That's where you start unraveling this. You find out who gave that person the order not to have anybody on that roof. And this would be a real simple matter to solve. That's not happening. In fact, the FBI doesn't even seem to be asking for help from the crowd in identifying the different people who may have been there. So something's really fishy about this, Stephen.
Yeah, like you compare this to like the Boston Marathon bomber, where they were like, please, everyone send in your video footage. We're going to have teams combing through this. We are going to get to the bottom of who this was. It's like they don't really seem to care. This Cheadle woman showed up earlier this week, and she sits in front of Congress for hours looking like a complete imbecile. And like, I'm sitting back going, oh my gosh, if this person was in charge of my life and my security, like, I can't believe that there hasn't been more assassination attempts. And it's certainly shown the world that there could be more in the future. I don't want that to happen, but yeah, the idiocy, as you mentioned, I don't know if you saw this, but just minutes before we went on, the Trump at the Trump assassination hearing, the head of the Secret Service, the FBI, and Homeland Security are declining to testify. They're saying we don't want to be involved. We don't want to share information. I'm sure that they're using the Christopher Wray, head of the FBI, excuse of, this is an open and active investigation. It would be inappropriate for me to talk about that. Do you think Congress rushed this, or do you think that they are using that as cover to not tell the American people what's happening?
I have no doubt that this is cover. And just, I ask people to think about this for a moment. These very same people, the FBI, et cetera, have spent the last 8 years terrorizing not just Donald Trump, but everybody around Donald Trump. I mean, they yanked Roger Stone and his wife out of bed at 6 a.m. with CNN in tow. They threw Steve Bannon in jail. They threw Peter Navarro in jail. They threw Paul Manafort in jail. They terrorized General Flynn and threatened his son with prosecution if he wouldn't plead guilty to totally fraudulent charges. Over and over again. And now we're being told that we can trust the FBI to investigate. That's the most asinine thing I ever heard. And nobody with two brain cells to rub together should believe that the people who've spent the last 8 years trying to destroy Donald Trump using lies, subterfuge, and absurdity can now be trusted to lead this investigation. So I actually called Roger Stone on Friday and just reminded him of our conversation. He was well aware of it. And I asked if he would talk again on the record about these things. And he said yes. And one of the questions I asked him was, what do we make of this investigation? Who should be leading this investigation? Can we trust the FBI with this? And his answer was brilliant. No, you can't trust the FBI. Congress needs to lead this investigation. Congress has subpoena power. Congress has at least more trust from Americans than the FBI does at this point. And Congress hasn't, at least explicitly, been trying to destroy Donald Trump for the last 8 years. So let's have Congress lead this investigation. And frankly, I don't think resigning like Cheadle just did is going to be enough. I think these people need to be brought in for questioning under oath. With the understanding that there's an active criminal investigation going on here, and anybody caught committing perjury is going to jail. Anybody committing contempt of Congress is going to jail. This is a serious thing. I mean, I know the media likes to downplay it, and, oh, MAGA world is outraged about Trump getting injured at a rally. No, this was an assassination attempt against the likely future president of the United States. It doesn't matter if you like him. Doesn't matter if you agree with his policies. Doesn't matter if you hate him. We've got to get to the bottom of this. We cannot have our politics settled by people shooting people. That is not going to fly. And so Congress needs to lead this probe, not the FBI.
Okay, that's interesting. Don Jr. said for these sickos that it wasn't enough that Trump was shot in the head. He wasn't shot enough in the head for them. And, I'm just so grateful, I'm sure you are too, that like the last 10 days, I haven't been reporting that, his brains were scattered everywhere like JFK's were. But yeah, I mean, people don't trust that the CIA wasn't involved in this because of things they've done in the past. People don't trust that the FBI wasn't involved in this because of what they've done in the past. I read today that there is going to be a bipartisan investigation. House Speaker Mike Johnson and Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries announced a bipartisan task force to investigate the security failures that allowed an assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. The task force, composed of 7 Republicans and 6 Democrats, will have subpoena authority and aim to uncover the incident. I'm grateful they're setting this up. This seems like the right thing to do. Let's go back in time and then we'll come back to this, Alex. Why didn't they do this with the January 6th committee? Why
very good
wasn't
question.
there bipartisan focus? Why wasn't there an equal amount? Instead, Nancy Pelosi stacks the deck in Trump-hating players, and then picks the two most Trump-hating Republicans in the nation. Why didn't we get that with the January 6th committee?
Yeah. And then they destroy all the evidence and then act like it's no big deal, even though their own inspector general says there were likely violations of federal law committed in destroying all this evidence. I mean, this thing just stinks to high heaven. And, it's good to see Congress getting involved here, but the idea that Hakeem Jeffries and the rest of these guys actually want to get to the bottom of this, I think, is rather implausible. But it is good that this is now being considered on the floor of Congress, but it's going to have to be a lot more serious. You're going to have to bring in professional investigators, and there's going to have to be accountability. We're in a time where these guys get a slap on the wrist, they resign, they sail off into the sunset with their wonderful pension paid for by taxpayers, and there's never accountability. And that's why we keep getting these problems over and over and over again. That's why the government is so out of control. It's because nobody's ever punished for not just incompetence. I mean, incompetence occasionally can be forgiven, but in this case, I believe this is much worse than incompetence. You mentioned the CIA too. I think the CIA needs to be very seriously looked at. When people ask about this Crooks guy, how did they get that guy on the roof? I don't know the exact mechanism yet, but we do know the FBI's got a very long track record of radicalizing idiots, people who have mental issues, potheads, right? We just saw it in Michigan with the fake kidnapping attempt on Gretchen Whitmer. The majority of the people involved in that alleged kidnapping attempt were either working for the FBI as agents or they were working for the FBI as confidential informants. The majority of the people involved in that. You look at virtually every major attempted terrorist attack since 9/11, and Human Rights Watch actually did this. They said every single one featured the direct involvement of government agents. And so hypothetically, I'm not saying this is what happened, but hypothetically, maybe some guy who's facing serious felony charges is recruited by the FBI to go find some idiot who hates Donald Trump and say, hey, you could be a hero. You could stop literally Hitler. Imagine future generations will thank you for doing this. And, we can make sure you can get up on this roof and get you a rifle. No problem at all. They blow his brains out. He's the Lee Harvey Oswald. Can't ask any questions. There's no trial. Is that what happened? I don't know. Another, I think, plausible hypothesis to go back to the CIA. MK Ultra. How quickly we forget these things, right? They were exposed by Congress doing some of the most horrific things imaginable. MK Ultra was their mind control program. It was allegedly a response to Soviet mind control programs. So, hey, we got to have one too. And we know some of what they did. They shredded most of the documents before Congress could get to them. But even the ones that weren't shredded give us some real insight into what they were doing. They were force feeding mental patients LSD. They were using trauma to try to shatter people's brains and create multiple personalities in there, at least one of which could be programmed to do assassinations. So is that what happened? I don't know. But these are all questions that need to be asked. And we need to recognize that the cover-ups we have had historically are out of control. To go back to the JFK assassination briefly, the Warren Commission was a total joke. It was a total fraud. Everybody with two brain cells to rub together knows that. So Congress did their own investigation. We never got to the bottom of it, but they did conclude, thankfully, that this was not the work of a lone nut. This was the work, they said, probably of a conspiracy, which just means two or more people working in secret for nefarious or illegal purposes. I would bet every last dollar, if I were a betting man, that what just happened with Donald Trump was a conspiracy. And they're hoping that we'll all just believe that some lone nut gunman, 20 years old, outsmarted the Secret Service because they're all fools. And frankly, I think we need to draw the line and say, we were born at night, but not last night. That's absurd.
Yeah. Okay, you mentioned Hakeem Jeffries, not yet that you have a hard time believing that he really would care about getting to the bottom of this. I keep thinking, these same Democrats that were saying Trump is the modern day Hitler, he's worse than Mussolini, he's Hitler, he's Hitler, he's Hitler. Suddenly, he's shot, and it's like prayers for Trump, prayers for the Trump family. We need to get to the bottom of this. Oh, prayers for Hitler? Like, whoa, why did you, prayers for Trump equals prayers for Hitler? That's where my brain goes. It's like, I don't trust any of these people to be on the committee. I'm grateful that it's bipartisan because I hope that will help keep it fair. But you know what I would love to see is like a committee of 13 people that like Donald Trump, because I believe that they would actually want to get to the bottom of this. Hakeem Jeffries, he took one day off to say maybe one prayer for Donald Trump, and then went back to saying this guy's going to destroy democracy. It's like, even if the FBI or the CIA or somebody wasn't involved, at least we know the mainstream media and members of Congress were brainwashing this Thomas Matthew Crooks, saying Donald Trump was evil over and over again. And like you say, if you had a clear shot at Hitler, why wouldn't you take it? So all they had to do was make Donald Trump Hitler, and somebody was going to take that shot.
Yeah. And I think it's very deliberate. It's very strategic. You have a deliberate effort to undermine the United States of America. It's been in place for a very long time. And to kind of merge the United States into this global system that all these globalists constantly harp on about. They've been talking publicly since at least the 1990s. And Donald Trump, again, doesn't matter what you think about him, he stands as an obstacle in the way of that process. In his first administration, he proved he wasn't just a normal politician. He doesn't just say things people want to hear and then do the opposite. When he said he was going to take a wrecking ball to the United Nations, that's exactly what he did. He got us out of UNESCO. He got us out of UNRWA. He got us out of the UN Human Rights Council. He blew up the Paris Accord. And so they know he's serious. When he said he was going to restore American energy dominance, he did it in a period of a few years. We went from a massive net importer of energy, of oil, from, in many cases, mass murdering communist and Islamic dictatorships, to becoming, for the first time since Eisenhower, a net exporter of energy. So if your agenda is to destroy the United States, and there's a guy like Donald Trump who's proved he's serious about reversing that process, well, he becomes then an existential threat. And so then you brainwash your followers to believe he's literally Hitler, which we've heard literally a bazillion times. And presto, you get somebody to work the magic. You hire a bunch of incompetent people for the Secret Service, and you allow a guy with a rifle to sit up on a roof that you can't cover because the slope is too slopey. I mean, it's so outrageous. And none of the people who've been on this anti-Trump crusade for all these years can be trusted to seriously investigate this.
Yeah. Have you been following this idea or theory, for lack of a better word, that there could be two shooters? I recently had Dr. Chris Mortensen Martinson on my show, and he was able to show me the audio of 3 bullets, a pause, and then 5 more bullets that sound totally different echo, and then a last bullet that also sounded, and yet we're being told there were only a couple of shots and then one miracle shot from the sniper. Have you looked into that? What are your thoughts on that?
I have. And frankly, I thought the audio was very convincing. It sounds to me like there were probably 2 shooters. And that's par for the course in operations like this. You know, I don't think anybody knows, outside of whoever was involved, exactly what happened with JFK. But I think it at this point should be very clear that there was more than one shooter. This wasn't just, the lone nut up in the book depository, Lee Harvey Oswald, who very conveniently was shot by Jack Ruby. I think we have the same situation here, where they probably had a professional sniper to kind of do the dirty deed if this 20-year-old doofus did not succeed. And I believe just exactly what Donald Trump said. His first real public comments after the fight thing was that God alone had preserved his life. And as a believer, I do believe in the sovereignty of God, and I do believe that Donald Trump preserved his life. I think this was a professional attempt by professionals who do this for a living to murder him. And I believe they had people on the inside helping them, and they failed. And I think that is what explains the very, very clear difference in the noise between the first few shots that were fired and the second round of shots that were fired.
Yeah. With Dr. Martinson, I had told him that after getting COVID really, really bad, I ended up with panic attacks and heart issues. And so the gunshot spikes that he shows reminded me of my echocardiogram, right? And you look at the first 3, they're very controlled, very spaced, like somebody is really taking their time to get those shots off. And then the next 5, which have a totally different sound and signal to them, look very out of control. Boom, 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 right? and they just look like two different heartbeats. Just to help people understand, as I listened to those, I could clearly hear the difference between the shots. It sounded even like maybe different types of guns. I don't know. Isn't it convenient that they got this miracle shot through the tree that took him out, and now we can't ask him any questions to find this out? And then as we dig in, a 20-year-old has no social media footprint, has 3 encrypted international bank accounts, has people coming to his house multiple times with geo-tracking, and then going back to, right next to an FBI building. Lots of things not adding up for me.
Yeah. And I think anybody who's just looking at this objectively and rationally should be coming to that same conclusion. And I think one of the things that we're going to see in the months to come, Stephen, is just like we saw with the JFK, they're going to throw all kinds of totally idiotic, totally ridiculous theories out there to try to discredit anyone who's asking questions. And I think the first one of those is already starting to emerge. We see a lot of leftists, including some mainstream leftists, saying, oh, no, Donald Trump was in on this. This was a staged assassination attempt. This was Donald Trump's people. I mean, give me a break, right? And so if they can throw 50, 60, 70 totally absurd conspiracy theories out there, then that makes it much more difficult to find the truth. So I think we need to be clear. These are legitimate questions. These are questions that need to be answered. And unfortunately, we cannot trust the majority of the individuals and agencies who claim to be investigating this on our behalf right now. So, but we do have to get to the bottom of this. And I do believe that when they missed, they went back to the drawing board. So I think Donald Trump's life remains in danger. I think there are very, very powerful people who still want to get rid of him. They see the writing on the wall when it comes to the election. They know that there's no way Kamala Harris or even Gavin Newsom or any of these people is going to win in a legitimate election. And so they're getting desperate now. And I hope Donald Trump's got a lot of his own very, very good security people surrounding him, and not just this clownish Secret Service agency that has become such a disgrace.
Yeah. Let's switch gears to Kamala Harris. Do you believe that Joe Biden stepped down on his own, or do you think that we are witnessing a soft coup where he was maybe threatened or blackmailed or strong-armed into dropping out of the race?
This seems to have been another deep state operation. You might even call it a coup, where the sitting elected president of the United States, regardless of what people might think about the election, the Electoral College did end up selecting him. So he is the legitimate president of the United States right now. He, I believe, has been removed involuntarily. I don't believe this was his decision. Frankly, I don't believe he's making a lot of decisions at all at this point. It seems very clear that his mind is no longer working properly. But we see very, very powerful forces arrayed against him, the Clintons, the Obamas, a lot of the political leaders on Capitol Hill. So I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered here. And if somebody is threatening the president of the United States, he needs to go public with that. He needs to share that with the world. Who are these people that can threaten the president of the United States? And we saw this in 2016, Stephen, with Donald Trump. You had Chuck Schumer, current Senate Majority Leader, go on MSNBC and say publicly that Donald Trump was being really stupid for taking on the intelligence agencies because they have 6 ways from Sunday to get back at you. What kind of government do we have when presidents can be bullied and intimidated, not by their voters, not by our elected officials in Congress, but by shadowy intelligence agencies that we don't know anything about? So I think something's really fishy with this thing, with Joe Biden stepping down. And it's another thing. We've got to get answers, and we're not going to get them from the fake media or the alphabet soup agencies.
Yeah. I believe he was pushed out, whether that was just a pressure campaign by Nancy Pelosi, Obama, and Hollywood teaming up on him. There's just so much that I wish we could be a fly on the wall. But just from an outsider, you have somebody who's saying over and over again, I'm still running. I'm the guy that can beat him. We've got lots of money. I've got the support and the delegates. I tell the truth. And then all of a sudden he lies. He doesn't have the delegates. He doesn't have the money. He's not running. And like everything just reversed, like within a matter of days. It's a little bit too suspicious for me. I want to expose people to your website as well as to your book. Tell us about your book and what we're going to learn about reading it.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen. So my book that deals with this subject that we've been talking about today, the deep state, it's called Deep State, the Invisible Government Behind the Scenes. And I wrote it thinking, going back to the great military strategist Sun Tzu, the Chinese military strategist, who, by the way, generals around the world still read him today, The Art of War, said, if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you're going to win every battle. And with that in mind, I thought we need a book exposing who the enemy is. And people were talking about the deep state. Donald Trump was talking about the deep state. Even some of the media was. Polling showed almost all Americans understood we had a deep state, but nobody had put what I felt was an adequate definition. So what I did with the book, I wanted to expose, who are these people? What are the organizations involved? What is their agenda? What are the tools and the mechanisms they use to advance that agenda? And finally, how do we stop it? So that was the goal with that book. We go through a lot of the different secret and secretive organizations that are involved. We go through the intelligence agencies and how they operate, and also the mechanisms that they're using to bring about their agenda. It's called, again, Deep State, the Invisible Government Behind the Scenes. Unfortunately, at Amazon, we were talking earlier, it's like $80 or something. I don't know why that is, but people can get it from my website for $12.50. I think it is Liberty Sentinel, sentinel.org/shop. And I'll send an autographed copy, and you just have to pay for the shipping. So,
okay, I'll put that down below. Yeah, when I saw the 80, as an author myself, I've seen Amazon raise my price on one of my books to like $125. I thought, my gosh, is this a college textbook? So I appreciate you offering that better price. I'll put those direct links down below. A couple more questions, and then I'll get you out of here. What is your understanding of this possible medical catastrophe that the president experienced while in Las Vegas? They're telling us it's COVID, but there's now medical people and police coming forward saying a back channel communication was opened that something had happened to the president. He needed to be moved immediately. And then instead of taking him to the hospital where the police had cleared, they got him on an airplane and flew him back east, telling everybody it was COVID. What do you know about that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting situation. I don't have any special insight or any sources on this, but I think right away, several questions need to be asked. Yes, I believe COVID was real. Yes, I believe it was a bioweapon, and I believe it's very, very dangerous. It can be very dangerous, especially in older people. But I think also Biden, one of the things that's so interesting about the deep state is that old cliche, there's no honor among thieves. It applies even more to these people. Now, Biden may have been a good and loyal puppet for his would-be masters for a few years, but he's outlived his usefulness now. And if he won't go down voluntarily, I believe his life is at risk. I believe these evildoers would poison him in a heartbeat. But just think back to Joseph Stalin. Out of his top few dozen deputies, only a tiny handful actually died a natural death. The vast majority of them were executed on Stalin's orders. So when you get to that level of power in a place where, unfortunately, morality has gone out the window, these people will stab each other. They'll stab their mother in the back to get ahead or to make a buck. And Biden, I believe, is in great danger. So was he poisoned? I don't know. Is it plausible? Is his life at risk? I believe it is. Could it have been COVID? I suppose. I know he said he's gotten 10 boosters, but at this point, I think everybody acknowledges those boosters are not really doing a whole lot. And so it's hard to know, but I do believe Biden is in danger. And if he doesn't go off quietly into the night, I think is in even more danger. And so I would urge people, if you are a person of faith, keep Biden and Trump in your prayers.
Yeah. Okay. Final question. The mainstream media would have us believe that Kamala Harris is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Who knew that she would blossom so much in just 24 hours of Biden being forced out of the Oval Office? She raises all of this money. They don't know where it came from. She suddenly, she looks more youthful. They're dressing her differently. Like this whole thing, they are switching gears to push her forward. And yet the thing that has me the most nervous about her is the thing that they're saying she's best at, which is her foreign policy. Her first chance for foreign policy, she leaves the prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, with no one in authority greeting him. They've ditched out on a meeting to the point where Benjamin Netanyahu says, I want a private meeting with Donald Trump. What are your thoughts on this quick turnaround to make Kamala Harris the next shining star?
I believe it was Sarah Palin who mentioned putting lipstick on a swine and how ineffective that might be. And I don't think anybody's going to buy this. I mean, Kamala Harris, God bless her, poor lady. At some point, you almost feel sympathy for her, but she is so unpopular. I mean, she's less popular than head lice. Even in California, in her own state, she couldn't get above a few percentage points in the open Democratic primary. So the idea that they're going to be able to sell her, market her to the American people is ludicrous. And I suspect they all know that as well. She is very unlikable. Her foreign policy experience. I mean, have people listened to her speeches? Russia is a big country and Ukraine is a small country. I mean, talking to us like we're kindergartners. This is silliness. So I suspect that they've got some sort of ulterior plan. I don't believe they're actually going to try to run Kamala. We'll see. I know all the heavyweights are coming out and endorsing her, but I think it is entirely possible, maybe even likely, that she will, for whatever reason, not speculating here, but whatever reason, be shuffled off to the side, maybe involuntarily. And maybe we'd have somebody like a Michelle Obama or somebody with a little bit more popular appeal put in that place. But things are changing very rapidly, and I think the chaos is partly deliberate, but I don't think Kamala Harris is somebody that they're going to be able to sell to the American people.
Yeah, completely agree with you. Alex Newman, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to put those links down below. We'll have you on the show again. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.